Okay, so this basically answers my question.
Yeah. So we start. Hello, everyone. This is the short episode of the Commerce DevCast where we'll be talking about the Composable Commerce. And today we have in our call the Vitaly, Senior Magento Adobe Commerce Developer at the Carry Company. Vitaly.
My pleasure.
Alexander, Magento Department Manager at WeConnect DA.
Hello.
It's also his pleasure, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Great guest, Rico Neitzel, Magento 1 beta developer, co-founder of Runners Route, co-organizer of the first Magento On conference in Germany, and speaker on many events, and a friend of mine.
It's a pleasure to me as well.
Yeah, it's nice to have you here.
By the way, it sounded like I'm a core developer of Magento, but I'm not. I just used Magento 1 in the early beta version, so just to make that clear.
He's old.
I am. True. But at the moment I still have hair. It becomes gray at the moment. Not like Vlad, who doesn't have hair anymore. I'm shaving. Yeah, you're shaving it. Perfect.
Anyway.
So, thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure.
Yeah, thank that you are here and you have accepted the invitation from 3 Ukrainian guys. You know. So let's talk about the composable commerce. What the hell is that? So what is composable commerce and when you should think about it and when you should not, maybe? So just general basic terms. What is that, Rico? You are the expert of composable commerce. We want to hear it from you.
Well, at least I have a strong opinion on composable commerce, but there might be more expert people. But composable commerce basically means that instead of having just one big application that does everything for you, you might have multiple smaller services. So, for example, if you work with Adobe Commerce or Magento, you might have Elasticsearch, for example, that already is considered composable commerce because the search is not provided by Magento anymore, but by an external solution. So you can do that further with Algolia, for example. Then it's an external company. It's up to you. So there are many levels, also many scales of composable, and I'm pretty sure we will talk about these in our podcast today.
Yeah. Okay. So actually, we're already using the composable commerce in many places already, like Adobe Commerce and all this.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Great. But I thought that this is a little bit a higher level term where you just communicate with the API between the different applications. And that are kind of end products on its own. Is that true?
Well, as I said, there are different ways how you can see composable architecture. It is not solely related to commerce, so it happens on other applications and systems as well. So first of all, we can see that it happens in a macroscopic or in a microscopic way. So, for example, you could have individual microservices. And this is something that people usually talk about. And these microservices can do specific things for you, like handling your card sessions or handling single sign-on applications, etc. So all of that is done within your application. On the other hand, you could also have it on a macroscopic scale. So, for example, you have individual applications like a CRM, a PIM, which manages your product data, and they will be used to query information for your eCommerce framework. So in that case, you are using APIs for sure. Yeah, this is one of the main drivers behind composable architecture.
Okay. And guys, have you experienced any composable commerce in your life and while you were doing the work? Of course, you're both playing around with the Magento and you faced it there, but some unexpected ways where you experienced that? Alexander, maybe?
Unexpected composable commerce.
Yeah, unexpected composable commerce.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It could be composable and it's unexpected, you know?
Yeah, I'm just really like that how Rico is highlighted it. That's composable commerce. It's more on the like a concept. It's not something. I mean, the set of rules or kind of the protocol or whatever that you need to do it. Things it's It's like more that's a great big blue book, domain-driven design, yeah, with kind of guidance that you can build an application in the way that you proceed with refactoring and the same educating yourself in the business domain, and then you're resulting in some really nice and working without legacy and etc. But it's not kind of the guide that step A plays the code in this way and etc. It's more just some guidance how you can do things, and the same works with Composable Commerce, because that currently we can find a lot of articles, a lot of information that describes in that it should be a headless, it should be a microservices and etc. But in fact, that's can be very different. The idea itself that you start in splitting your application, your business, whatever, not a business, but your solution for your business into multiple parts. Because what are alternatives we can have to the composable commerce? It's, for example, the monolith application, when you have everything in the one basket, like Olex in one basket, and yeah, working with it in this way. And I guess if we historically that happened, that Magento 1 probably was one of the best monolithic applications in the e-commerce history, and probably not the best, but at least the most popular. Before that's we moved to Magento 2 and Adobe started to introduce microservice. And anyway, that's created a concept that Magento 1 became the core of many businesses, many companies, many brands. And then the way that everything else was built around the Magento 1, and they ended up in the situation like, if you want to replace Magento 1, then it's almost not possible to do without the investments, because you need to build the whole your ecosystem, the whole your whole your digitalization of your business. You need to build it from scratch and migrate then all the data to the another system. So then when we started to have the concept of composable commerce, that's we don't need to put everything into a single place, and it's better to have the different components for different destinations. If we don't want to manage orders in Magento, we can move it to another order management system. If we don't want to manage inventory in a system in e-commerce engine, then we also can put it to another VMS system or whatever. So that's the idea, that it's not only the guidance. Sorry, it's not only the like straightforward road to build. It's rather the guidance itself, like how applications should be built.
Okay, yeah. So you were actually jumping a bit to the question number 2 that we have here and we want to highlight and discuss. That's about what is the purpose and what the problems does it solves, right? And if I understood you correctly, that's just decoupling and decomposition of the very complex systems to making sure that it would be better to support it and replace each of them, right? That's your ideal.
That's what we have from experience. Like that's initially when somebody started to build their business, they tried to do it as simple as possible, and they ended up to have it very complex. And then there was like another direction appeared, and it was also popularized that we can do things differently. Just to compose it.
Yeah, I got it. So let's talk about your experience, Vitaly. So what do you have on your hands in this area?
I think when it goes about Magento Commerce, the Composable Commerce goal is not to get rid of complexity, but rather to reinforce problematic areas that like classic technologies that are used in Magento have. For example, MySQL is bad for searching, so we are using something different. It's not about like decomposition, because I believe we have a different concept for this, which is multi-services that nowadays Adobe want to implement using this app builder. So it's a little bit different than decomposition. And in my opinion, It's really hard to reach bottleneck in Magento in terms of scalability, and because we have this modular structure, and I believe it's really great. You really need to have a huge store with like entire custom functionality to get to some limits there. So yeah, I believe it's more about using different tools like that have better performance in specific areas, not using like MySQL for everything or PHP for everything.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually what the main idea is. You can pick the best in breed different services and combine them and receive the solution. So you mentioned Adobe Commerce, Vitaly, but how do you think would it be works better with some other solutions? Maybe you could think about other platforms.
I believe this approach is applicable literally for everything in software development, because you cannot use one technology that check all boxes. Like it's not possible.
Okay, so actually you can think about the composable architecture on a various levels, from the level of the developer that is thinking, should I connect this server to another server, or on the level of the business owner that is thinking about, let's connect this application with another one to gain the best out of both of them. Let's ask our expert, Rico Neitzel, great Magento 1 beta developer. What
If you say it like so, it sounds very sarcastic.
It's not a sarcastic moment.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway,
yeah.
What do you think about our chain of thoughts that we just produced? Because you know more about the composable commerce, and I believe that's something that when we talk about the composable commerce, we're talking mostly on a business level, but less on a technical level. Am I right?
Basically both, and also both levels have their own challenges. What I think is quite problematic is that composable commerce at the moment, or composable architecture at the moment, is used as some kind of a hype train and buzzword. So large agencies will just go around and say, hey, this is the solution to everything. So you have scalability issues here, you have complexity issues there, blah, blah, blah. Unfortunately, what they don't do is that you trade in all of this with even more complexity, and probably also it's more pricey and it might take longer to implement. And there are also different approaches here. So Alexander, you already mentioned best of breed. This is one approach to composable architecture. The other one is that you just lock people into an ecosystem, like Commerce Tools, for example, is doing. So there you don't have best of breed, you have an opinionated system. So you still have various microservices that you can connect, but still they are kind of thinking of the broader architectural ecosphere there, in which you have to exist with your own online shop. And also when it comes to the consideration of composable commerce, you have to think about, hey, should I rely on external third-party services, so SaaS solutions? Or, I mean, you can do it all yourself. You can spin up multiple virtual environments, like AWS or Azure or whatever, and maintain and kind of develop these microservices yourself. So that's what I mean with there are multiple levels of composable architecture. And usually what they leave out is the added complexity. So if someone says, hey, you have monolithic approach, everything is inside Magento or in Adobe Commerce, whatever, you can split it up, search here, search there, everything becomes better, which is most probably true when it comes to the actual value for your client. So the search improves, but you have to manage the new search service. And what happens if there is an issue? Then you have multiple systems. You have to track requests across multiple systems. You need monitoring across multiple systems. And usually, and that happens very often and probably also in your projects, if you have 2 or 3 third-party service providers that all have to do the same or touch base on the same point, then no one of them is taking the responsibility. They all try to push it away and say, no, it's not our system. You have to look at the other systems. And then you quickly get into some kind of an responsibility vacuum where you don't know, who should I ask? I have a problem. And what also is left out here is, even if I have something like commerce tools, where you get everything from one vendor and you don't have best of breed of different vendors, you still need glue code. It just doesn't work if you sign up the contract and set up a few checkboxes and say, I want the card, I want the search, I want the catalog, and so on. These are just services. You have to create the code that actually interacts with these services. Nobody talks about it, but you still have to develop an application using these things. And here comes the tricky part. So I'm working with Magento since ages. As Vlad already mentioned, I started with the Magento 1 beta version. Yeah. So I finally understand how the Magento and Adobe developers think when they develop features. Now let's think of something where I have a best of breed approach, where I have to kind of crouch into the brains of various developers and different methodologies and probably also company core values, and they all develop in a completely different way. And I have to rely on their documentation, because that's another thing. I can't look inside of it. I have to basically live with the API. If something doesn't work as I would expect it, and the documentation isn't clear about it, yeah, that's it. So I can write an email to support and hope that I find someone there who is technically skilled enough to answer my question. But still, I have to kind of reverse engineer how that system works. And this is super tricky sometimes. That's why so to be clear, I'm not against composable architecture. It's an amazing tool if you need it. But I don't like the approach of, I say, agencies and service providers that are praising it like the holy grail of commerce, and that will solve all your problems, because it will get more expensive, it takes much more time, and also your developers have a steep learning curve. And if it's not just one service provider like Commerce Tools or Scale, which is a opinionated ecosphere, but if you go for best of breed from various vendors, you have to really learn, all of these different APIs and approaches, etc., and figure out how you can stick it together. So that's quite challenging, and nobody talks about that.
You just did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I want to squeeze one sentence from each of you.
Mm-hmm.
What is the composable commerce definition for the merchant? So, Rico, shoot one sentence. Composable commerce definition for the merchant. Try to squeeze the information in this one sentence.
Holy shit. I'm a person of many words, so I think I have to think about this. So probably you can ask Alexander first, or Vitaly, and I will think about my sentence and try to squeeze it in.
Uno, yeah? Let's
Jesus.
answer the question to someone else.
Yeah.
Okay, for you, Alexander. So what do you think would be the right definition of the composable commerce when you talk to the merchant to explain him what is that? Imagine he already understands that there are systems, there are APIs, and they may communicate and connect with each other.
No, actually, you asked the question instead of words. I just imagined the picture like from the meme, and there's Noah and the many different animals, and they produce the animal with parts of each other. I will send you after this podcast.
Yeah.
For merchants to understand the composable commerce, if they already know what's in APIs and the microservice architecture, it's a very good question. It's something that's when your business is ready. I don't know how to explain it to the better. Like, this is some kind of eventual step if your business continue growing and you are trying to figure out what will be the best approach for further extension of the business, and I mean the digital extension. Yeah, like if you're having the store, then probably you can end up with adding the marketplace, extend it to new markets, and adding even more features, like I don't know, like an Amazon platform.
Okay, that's the end of the sentence.
I was just asking if it's all added with commas or is there a period in between? So
Yeah, it's just thoughts and out that I'm just cannot end up with the one sentence to explain this thing.
Okay,
Maybe
but you said that
Vitaly can try it.
When the business is growing up and is thinking about getting something better they're thinking about the composable commerce. It's where you're thinking about the composable commerce and try to use that.
Just totally different approach. Yeah, like you can build something simple, but at some moment you can reach the seal. Like you cannot further extend without introducing some dramatic complexity. And this is something that where you need to invest a lot, but then you have more options to extend it. So
okay, yeah, that's pretty fine explanation. Thank you very much, Vitaly. If you're ready, you can say. If no, I can say my.
Let's see. I would say it's a way to solve business problem out of the scope of the current platform. Like that's it.
Okay. May I try, Rico, before the expert steps in and say the word? So, what is my definition when I talk to the merchant? If I would talk to the merchant, try to explain him what the hell is composable commerce. It's when you see you have reached the ceiling, right? And you want to break it, and you could use the many, many great tools from various areas, combine them together, and try to break out from this threshold that you are heading to. But most likely you will need to spend much more time and resources to make it works properly. And that may be paid off. Sounds like that. It's a long sentence.
I was just about to say it's a perfect example that composable commerce is not as easy as some agencies or service providers try to make you believe. If even highly skilled people like us who work with such architectures, etc., every day cannot phrase one simple sentence to actually describe that pattern or the value for a merchant. So I would say that composable architecture might give you the ability to easier extend features of your application, but it comes with a cost. This is super heavily cut together, but it somehow I hopefully gets what I try to say.
So you may use monolithic application and that may fit your needs, but if you want more, connect more shit together.
Yeah.
I also heard your sentence come with something better. So it can be...
Second try.
Yeah, second try, exactly. So if you don't want to lock in on some specific technologies or vendor or services, the composable commerce might be a solution for you.
Yeah. That's also the great point. That's also the thing to consider. Okay, and we already talked about the purpose and the problems it solves, but I want us to sum it up to make it somehow easy to read and easy to understand.
I actually, before this, I have a question, guys. How do you think who is the merchant who should start thinking about composable commerce?
Like I think we need to answer the question, what are the problems it's solving? And then we definitely will gonna put the question about the merchant.
Okay.
You know? So that's comes up from the problem. So Rico, why? Warum? Why do we need all of that?
To be fair, I don't know. I mean, monolithic software works just fine, isn't it?
Yeah.
Easy. No, but as we've already mentioned, something like the database structure underneath Magento, MySQL, it's not very good at searching things, especially when it comes to very large data. So there are other applications that are much better with that, like Elasticsearch or its counterpart OpenSearch or TypeSense, etc. Also as third parties like Algolia, etc. So you can either do it yourself, and you can also have it as a third party. So in this case, this might help you to extend features. And yeah, basically it can help you to extend features and to make them better, you know.
Okay.
And in that case, this is it will basically solve a lot of different problems. Like my catalog is too slow, or my cart doesn't work under specific circumstances. So you can always look for a solution that works as a microservice and solves your problem.
So for example, I don't like the front end of my application.
Yeah.
But I have a pretty good backend API where some other front end can communicate to.
No, exactly.
And I have totally different application for the front end and it's communicating with the API, and that's already the composable commerce. Or as you mentioned, the search, don't use MySQL, use Elasticsearch, use a different tool, and so on and so on. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
That's actually a good point. Front end is also, so if we talk about shopware, for example, to say something different here. Shopware 6 was completely redeveloped with API first approach. So there's actually just a core and it doesn't have any kind of front end. So the backend application is a unique JavaScript application, and the front end can also be some decoupled thing like a Vue storefront, for example, for shopware. So what they've tried with Magento 2 to kind of refactor Magento into an API first application, which miserably failed, but this is was the idea behind it, and they are still continuously progressing there, is something that works just fine. So for Magento, for example, we have Hoover, which still uses the monolithic approach and heavily relies on server rendering, still has some GraphQL application parts which just solely connect to the API. And in that case, they're kind of decoupled. So we could easily replace them with something different, and it would still work because the features are defined by the application, by the front-end layer, but not by the application itself. No. Very good example.
And I believe now we can get back to your question, Alexander. What is the merchant that needs composable commerce, right? Or you want to rephrase it somehow?
Yeah, like at what step like the merchants should start thinking about it or considering it as an option? So, like, okay. Just imagine that I'm a merchant and you try to sell it to me. What I should pay attention to, like what's the metrics of my business that should fit into profile of potential client for composable commerce application.
I have an idea. I may start, and Rico may, and Vitaly may, just fix my statements. So I think there is no such a thing where the point in time where you should think or should not think about the composable commerce. You should always have all options on your table and think about them. And it depends on what you need. If you're going to find a pretty good monolithic application that are going to fit your needs, and you do not see how or when you should extend it to something bigger, something more, to use the better tools in a near 2 years, and you just need to start and see what's going on, then it's better to use the monolithic application. But if you already see that you don't see the proper application that fits your needs, and you want to have a great search, you want to have a much better front-end experience, and you don't see that any application provides that out of the box, and you need to connect something else to that, then you definitely need to think about the composable commerce. Also, if we're going to talk about the business processes, there are various ERP systems, right? And when you connect them to your store, it's already some kind of composable commerce part. So maybe you will gonna need to use the composable commerce principles always. Yeah, that's my thoughts. What do you think, guys?
I want to chime in here quickly. So from what you just said, it sounds like you can do either this or that. But the reality is that you can start with a monolithic application, and you can start to kind of cut out specific pieces and replace them with composable architecture. So Especially if you go for the best of breed approach, you can choose any vendor out there. It is a little bit more difficult if you want to migrate to one of those opinionated service providers like Scale or Commerce Tools, etc., where they have all of the services in-house and kind of force you to stay within the ecosystem. But hey, look at Magento. Yeah, we started with Magento. It has a MySQL search. It was shitty. So at some point, we've replaced it with Elasticsearch. And Elasticsearch didn't work well, so we used Algolia for it. Yeah, and now probably we want to replace other parts there. And I think it's possible. Sometimes it's a little bit more difficult, yeah, because the core application doesn't provide an API for specific information. Then we have to build this, and then we have to make the specific part of the application open to composable architecture. But still, that's possible. So for merchants, I think they can easily start with a monolithic approach, and then change this approach based on their needs, and they don't have to make the decision upfront.
Okay, yeah, totally agree with you. Actually, that's what's happening for many of our
exactly. Yeah, that's the reality out there. Yeah.
Okay. Any thoughts on that, or we move on to another topic? Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about examples pretty briefly. You know, about examples of the platforms that is utilizing the composable commerce in a small or big way, you know. For example, we already mentioned the Shopware, the Magento, the Adobe Commerce. We have not talked about the Shopify or other platforms, but I want to hear about specifically this new thing with Adobe SaaS. So that would be a completely composable commerce approach, right? Am I right, Rico? So that's just a couple services getting connected together.
And yes and no. So I've seen this approach in a slightly different flavor on the Shopware side. So I specifically address here the app builder pattern thing because they also tried to do this with Shopware. So what those vendors usually try to make you believe is, hey, this is amazing. It's an application thingy. It uses the API, and you can connect them all. It's SaaS ready, but it can also work with your PaaS, so platform on premise. But still, the problem is what they usually leave out is that the integration level of such applications, it doesn't really work that well compared to real extensions that you can basically put into the application, into the core of the application. So what they also don't talk about is if you create such an application, you need a server where this application is running. So you as a developer also have additional obligations there. You have to make sure that you have an API that will basically do your business logic that you provide in your application. So you have a shop that sends you data, you somehow modify, process the data, and then you send something back. But this processing cannot happen inside the application anymore, like we did with extensions. So it was all on-site. Now, what happens if such a provider didn't pay the electricity bill and their server went down? Yeah? Even if it's just for a few hours, if that is a vital part of your business process, that's a big issue, and nobody talks about it. And also, many developers that now try to go for this app approach do not recognize what it actually means to be a service provider. And I think this is challenging. It has the big advantage that you can have an Adobe SaaS solution where you have a managed application core by Adobe, so they do the upgrades, etc. And you can basically link applications to it. Even if you are fine with this limited approach, then it would be fine. Yeah, but I see a lot of challenges for the projects that I had in the past because merchants usually just have a very high level of individualization required, and I pretty much doubt that this is always possible with applications.
Okay, so you're basically saying that it's too much of a composable commerce for the Adobe SaaS, right? So there is too much of a complexity that could be introduced there, and you should balance the composable approaches with the on-site or monolithic approaches, right?
No. So I do totally understand that providers like Adobe and Shopware try to get as much revenue as possible. So keeping the merchants on site, making sure that everything goes through their ecosystem. But yeah, I truly believe that the merchant itself will have a hard time with it, and that it's also a bit too expensive at the end. It looks cheaper, but at the end, it's not.
Okay. Guys, your point of view on that?
I would like to go deeper why it's gonna be more expensive, because there are particular reasons. Let's go with an example 99% of merchants already have. It's splitting business logic of business automation to ERP and splitting e-commerce logic to storefront, right? So it's basically every store has ERP, almost all, have these two parts. So, and when it goes about developing something, usually you need to have logic on the ERP side, on the storefront side, and it always hard to cover this logic with some end-to-end tests because you need to consider both sides. It's also hard to have data consistent because, for example, for deployment in Magento we have data patches, and sometimes in ERP we don't have such features, and on SaaS services, so we need to do Magento part automatically and another part manually, which can lead to some issues. Also maintaining code. For example, it's a great practice to have all your code in a single repository, so whenever you make deployment, your code is up to date. But if you add more and more services, the code become less manageable. For example, even funks like Facebook or I don't know, Google, they try to keep all the code in huge, big one repository. So there is no need for just small merchants who just sell some regular thing to go wild with like, I don't know, 20 repositories. In my practice, I even have issue with a separate repository for tests and separate repository for storefront, and sometimes you making pull requests to one repository and like two pull requests, one for test, another for implementation, and code reviewer just forgotten about test, or for example, so it makes inconsistency problems. So yeah, so there are a lot of trade-offs. So you just need to have strong reason for adding even one small more additional service, because it can make life really harder.
Okay, pretty interesting. So we were into the quite deep discussing the Adobe SaaS right now instead of the Composable Commerce, but that's actually the Composable Commerce thing. And yeah, and Alexander, you have something to say on that, right?
Yeah, I'm just waiting this moment. Thank you. I just want to step a little bit back from the discussion of Adobe SaaS and Composable Commerce from Adobe. And yeah, I want to refer to the thing that Rico mentioned, that it's very important how these things with Composable Commerce will be implemented. Because eventually, at some point of time, I guess if the business is growing, then the merchants will face the moment when they want to put some functionality into some another system, somehow connected to their commerce engine, whatever it is, Magento, Adobe Commerce, or whatever. And then this process will continue. Like the business is growing, new services start to add in, and the implementation itself is very important. Why? If we even think about the space station that is rounding around the Earth, that there is a modules built in USA and modules built in USSR, and even if they worked on the project, they still require an adapter to connect it together. Because I mean, even these things become very fast complex, even if you just need to connect two modules. And if you are starting to add more and more systems to your web shop, to your commerce, then you need to be very careful, because it's very easy to make things complex. And they said about examples, I'm just in I guess recently, probably in 2 years, we had two clients, and they were both on Magento 1. They were followed the same path, so they started the monolith application, they grew it to some extent, they started to add the ERP, warehouse management, label printing, and etc. And they both connected everything with Magento 1. So in this case, there was a core from Magento 1, and then everything else that's communicate with Magento, which was pretty fine until the moment they decided actually to migrate to Magento 2. And then they realized the scope of the work, because I mean, if you're spending some hours or some developer hours every month in an extent of 10 years, then you end up, that's when you need to migrate from this monolith solution to something else. It's huge and really, really expensive. So the first merchant, whatever we tried to discuss with their internal IT teams, they ended up to have Magento 2 that connects to Magento 1, and then basically keep everything that's communicating with the Magento 1 this way. So basically Magento 2 became a storefront when the center of the e-commerce is still Magento 1, that they're receiving orders, pushing back products to Magento 2 in the inventory, and then everything goes to another system. It was, well, kind of the fun situation, because I mean that they kind of, if one day will end up with Magento 3 or they want to move to another system, they will still need to build this communication, and they will still need to invest a lot into these things. And the future plans, whatever we're trying to convince them or to think about some another design, was to just move all these dependencies from Magento 1 to Magento 2. With another merchant, we worked more deeply with their IT team, and we ended up in some slightly different approach. Instead of keeping everything with Magento 1, we just imagine it's some abstract integration layer that's communicated with events. We designed the models, the like entities that exist there, because I mean every commerce engine, it has orders, it has products, it has customers, and etc. So then we figured out what parts should be there, and we haven't introduced any direct connections between them. So there are some abstract integration, like the bus that's receiving events, and all systems are just receiving and sending data inside this bus. Of course, there was some direct integration required. For example, if you're on storefront, you want to show recommendations driven by AI. Yeah. Magento has nothing out of the box for it. You can use Sensei, but this wasn't the case for this customer because they use Magento open source. And what we did, we actually put the Magento 2 as a front end. They use a Hoover theme. The rendering happens in PHP. They are still relying on the GraphQL. They're still relying on PHP rendering, so they're a mix of everything. And they also have the separated layer of applications on this bus that's written on .NET. That they are making API calls to receive the data and show recommendations, for example. So they basically removed all the dependencies from Magento 1, put it into this integration layer, left Magento 2 as just a front end to show the picture, show the products, receive card, and that ended up in the Composable Commerce. And it was really nice because it even had it future-proof that we replaced some of the systems from their ecosystem to another system, and it was just so smoothly, because basically what they need is to map the event. For example, if you receive an order, then you know what it will be the format, then you need to map to the format of the new system, and the same that happens with what the system is pushing the event, that you already know what will be the event, so you're mapping it back. That's from my experience working with things around Composable.
Okay, but what if we're going to talk about the out-of-the-box solutions in e-commerce? So let's say everyone in this call we're going to tell the 3 best out-of-the-box solutions that could support the Composable Commerce principles to get as much as possible from the benefits of all the available tools for the commerce, right? So just 3 tools. I can start. So I believe this is the Magento 2 and Adobe Commerce. They have a pretty good API connections. They have a GraphQL layer. They have a REST API. They even have a SOAP API. But shh. The second tool, yeah, the second tool, I believe that's the Shopify. So they have this interesting approach with the like app builder thing, but they're a pretty good example of the composable commerce. And the third one would be, as for me, that's the shopware, right? Because the reasons mentioned by the Rico, because the API is also quite good there. Rico, do you ready to tell three top tools?
So for sure, it's a little bit biased, but I also like Magento 2 very much. The next one on this winners, how's it called? Winner stairs is
Winners?
I think it's Shopware. Well, I don't like much of it because I mean it is already quite new compared to Shopware 5, and I dropped off from Shopware 5 quite early and said, okay, that's not a tool of mine. Shopware 6 is much better, but still compared to Magento 2, it's not as mature and not as developer related. And then actually, I would probably not say it's Shopify because I know a few things about the Shopify server infrastructure. So I wouldn't like that, but I would rather go for an approach with commerce tools or Scale. Although I don't like vendor lock-in, and this somehow happens there. Same with this Adobe SaaS solutions. So they try to keep you inside their ecosystem to squeeze you out like a lemon, and little coins drop out of your lemon. But yeah, I think this is my 3 options here.
Okay, great. Alexander?
Yeah, I was thinking of repeat you guys. That's Adobe Commerce or Magento or whatever I called it, line of this e-commerce engines products. I'm also kind of thinking about the Shopify, except that that's it kind of more. It's more merchant friendly. There many things can happen with admin panel, and you can integrate basically different systems. But we also had an experience where it's caused even more problems. So I put it probably Shopify on number 3, and number 2 is Commerce Tools.
Commerce Tools. Okay, great. Vitaly?
Yeah, regarding this point, well, I don't quite have opinion, unfortunately, because on developer side of things, I'm very specific in my career, and I always sticking to Magento 2, and I barely touch other systems. And those systems I've touched, they are worst, way worse than what Magento provides, especially for middle-sized business and higher. So, and but like I don't believe there is such a list of best tools, because it's very depend on certain customer needs. Because why do you need to have this in the first place? Like maybe having HTML and JavaScript landing page is enough for you, and maybe is Adobe Commerce is not enough for you. It's very dependent, like on business side and requirements.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. So great. So we discussed about many points right now, and I want to address the one and the last topic that we already touched in many of our speeches. What are the problems and of the composable commerce and MAR, right? So what issues may you face when you're gonna play around with the composable commerce? Let's cut it down to the 3 main problems that I think are the Yeah, Rico, sorry, I'm gonna cut it down because we already talked pretty much about all the problems that we have here. So let's squeeze it to the three takes and 3 sentences, right? So let me maybe start. I think the problem number one, that's the complexity of the development and the support. The problem number two, you are depending on many services and they could go down, and or you need to pay quite a bit of money for them to make them running. So there's the dependency on the services. And the problem number three, it's pretty hard to compose all of this even on a paper. You need to have a special person that knows how to connect all of that, how to connect it to the business processes and make sure that things are going to get running. So this is my top three. Yeah. Rico?
One thing that Alexander already mentioned with the International Space Station is that you need adapters, which is quite funny because one of my biggest contrapoints is they make you believe that you can exchange these individual tools. So now you use this search, but tomorrow you can use this search. It just doesn't work because the connecting points are not identical. They sometimes are completely different, also with a different business logic behind it. So it basically just doesn't work. You can't switch out things easily. That's one thing. On the other hand, tracking technical issues is a nightmare, especially when it's really composable architecture where you work with multiple vendors and multiple microservices. Keeping data consistent and figuring out where issues appear, it's almost impossible, I truly believe. I've never had this situation, but I can't imagine that it's as easy as with a monolithic approach in PHP where you start a debugger, go through, and you exactly know you drop this in and this falls out and everything in between. And the last point is basically costs, like you already mentioned, Vlad. You need a person that really keeps track of all of this. It's not about the concept written down on paper, but also making sure that you have all the contracts ready, monitor all the services, service contracts, make sure that you have contact persons ready, that you know which tool is used for what. So alone, the documentation is a big piece of work. Not talking about development and all the other stuff. So I think Composable Commerce on this point might charge you more than a monolithic approach.
Yeah. Alexander, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was thinking that probably number one is the problem that it's very hard to make it efficient, very easy to make it complex. Yeah, it's just hard to build it right. The second one is vendor management. Basically, if you have a dozen of different services, as Rico mentioned, that there are different development approaches and philosophy behind it, and there also will be some fees that you need to pay for this each of this service, and they can change and whatever. There's just different pieces of your ecosystem that live in their own life, move in some direction, and you still need to keep them connected to make your business run. The number two and the number three, I think it's also the security nightmare. I mean, the problem that can cause, like if you're in a monolith application, you need to track like what's happening inside your system and not allow to anyone to get in. With this composable approach, that you also need to taking responsibility of what happens on the other systems, because if there will be a breach and your data will flow somewhere in the internet, then it will be a problem of your business because you're trusted to this vendor. And it's a GDPR nightmare, and PCI DSS is also a nightmare. So yeah.
Vitaly, your turn.
Yeah, I agree with all said. I might add maybe one point is a lack of standard, because we have this concept of microservices, we have this concept of composable commerce, but every platform implements this approach in their own way, and it's quite hard to replace team member or responsible person, because you really need to have deep knowledge of domain structure of certain business. When it goes, for example, about just a regular Magento store, it's quite easy to switch between projects or switch developers, because we have standards how to write code, what good is in, what are best approaches in the industry, what are not that good. So we actually know how to deal with that. But when it goes about this, a lot of different services, a lot of different languages, someone choosing Java microservices, someone choosing app builder approach, and so on. So a lot of stuff. And this is why it has really steep entry point for just people. So this is why it's also gonna cost more, not just because of the development process is more complicated, but because of this variety of technologies and approaches.
Okay, great. Totally agree with all of your points. And to sum it up, I want to say, so if you want to take the best out of many tools and many instruments that are available, that's wise to use the composable commerce. That's wise to connect some of the services that you really need for your business. It's also wise to keep a balance between the monolithic application and the composable commerce, because the costs of the composable commerce are usually much higher than monolithic application, regular monolithic applications. And it has the cons that we have mentioned, but the benefits could have just overweight all of those cons. And in most of the cases, they do. Do you have anything to add, guys, to this?
I'd like to share that. So I was talking about this specific topic last year at a conference in Munich, and I also created some kind of survey which people can fill in to see if composable architecture might be interesting for them. So what we could theoretically do, I don't know if you guys have show notes, so we could probably link the survey, and it's available in German and English, so probably we can add this there to give merchants or interested people such kind of a first glimpse of whether composable architecture might be an option for them or not.
Yeah, that would be great, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was a great session. I think let's call it today. And thanks for coming, guys. Thank you, Rico, that you have joined us for this session. That was pretty great insights. And thank you for that.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, and ciao, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.